On May 15th, 2019, 3 friends visited the deserted town resort close to Fukushima, Japan. This area was evacuated in 2011 due to the nuclear disaster, although prohibited from entering. Some urban explorers still go there, enthralled by the ability to step into the untouched past and explore this now ghost town. For 17-year-olds Kenzo Mori, Minato Ito, and Hana Ogawa, this seemingly innocent adventure would submit them to inconceivable horrors, ones channeled by something otherworldly. Of the 3 teenagers that entered the deserted resort town, only one of them made it out. Kenzo was discovered by police officers on May 18th, 2019, sitting by the car on the edge of the cutoff zone. He was mumbling incoherently to himself, and it took several days for him to speak to the authorities about what happened to him and his friends. This is Kenzo Mori's account, translated into English, of the horrors he claimed happened to them in this abandoned town. I remember visiting this resort town back when I was a kid. Before the disaster happened, I hadn't thought about that place in years, but suddenly it was all I could think about. I hadn't been back since then, but I decided it would be cool to go and check it out. I mentioned it to my friend Minato and my girlfriend Hannah, and I asked if they wanted to come with me. Minato, who didn't blink twice at breaking the rules, was keen to go, but Hannah was hesitant. She didn't want to get in trouble. I managed to convince her that it'd be fine. I told her that lots of towns near there were being repopulated, so it wouldn't be dangerous. Thinking back on it now, I pressured her a lot into coming with us, even though I saw the hesitation in her eyes. She only agreed to go because of me. Knowing what I know now, that's something that will always haunt me. Minato was the only one of us who could drive, so he took his brother's car. On the way there, Hannah didn't say much, and I took her hand and I reassured her we wouldn't stay long. It would all be okay. Minato rolled his eyes and told us to just cut it out. He hated it when we were soppy, as I guess it made him feel left out. We didn't want to draw unwanted attention to ourselves. We parked on a street lined with trees outside the deserted area, and then we walked a mile-long trek to the ghost town. As usual, Minato joked around, but Hannah and I stayed silent. I held her hand because I could see that she was nervous, but Minato didn't say anything about it this time. As we walked, this gust of wind seemed to follow us. It itched my skin, and it ruffled my hair. It blew Minato's hat clean off his head, but he turned and started accusing me of knocking it off. When I told him to relax, as I said it was the wind, he crinkled his nose, grabbed his hat, and muttered something to himself. As soon as we walked past the titled "No Entry" sign, the world felt different, as if it was all somehow still. There was a grayness suddenly to the neglected buildings and the rusty cars. I also realized how silent it was. There were no bird or insect calls, nothing. All I heard were our footsteps and my beating heart. Anna was on edge and kept rubbing her head. I asked her if she was okay, and she asked me if I heard them too. I didn't hear anything, and when I told her this, she twisted her bracelet and looked alarmed. I put this down to her nerves, but before I could try reassuring her, Minato raced ahead to some abandoned grocery store. But as he ran, this feeling stirred inside of me and told me that was a bad idea. This wasn't a new feeling. I'd experienced it ever since I'd been a kid. It went way beyond a gut feeling. When I felt the knot in my chest and the growling in my head, I knew danger was coming. I was never wrong. I shouted, "Hey, Minato, come back." He stopped, dead, leaned against the wall, grinned at me, and replied, "What's the matter, Kenzo? Are you scared?" That's when the crashing sound broke through the silence, and a section of the shop's veranda fell down and crushed him. The sound of crunching bone echoed off the broken building, and inside my head, that sound, I can't explain how haunting that sound was. I stood there stunned with fear. When I finally managed to pull myself out of it, I ran over there and I saw Minato's hand sticking out of the debris. I watched his fingers twitch. I frantically told him, "It will be okay, Minato. I'm getting you out of there." And I clawed at that rubble. With my bare hands I clawed, but there was just too much of it. I tried to free him, but it was too late. His fingers stopped twitching. I gripped his hand and tried to shake him, tried to shake life into him. It was too late. I knew he was gone. I'd left my phone charging in the car, so I couldn't even call for help. But that's when I remembered that Hannah had her phone. I shouted for her to call someone, but that's when I noticed that Hannah wasn't there. I didn't know what to do. The car keys were buried with Minato, and Hannah was the only one of us with a phone. I needed to find Hannah. I needed to find her and get us out of here. As I forced myself to walk forward, I had this feeling that I was being watched. I felt the eyes on me through the shadows. At first, I thought it was Hannah. I called her name and I went over there. I saw something lurking behind the tree line, but it was a man of about 50 with dirty clothes. Then suddenly, he disappeared. I stood there thinking I must have imagined him. I'd just seen my best friend be crushed to death. It made sense that I wasn't thinking rationally. I searched the town for Hannah. I shouldn't have known where I was going, as it'd been years since I'd last been there. Yet I seemed to know exactly where to go. I walked through these derelict buildings, sunken and partly reclaimed by nature, and it all looked different, yet exactly the same. As I came to this one alley, it was blocked by a fallen tree. A feeling was telling me to continue. That, and I heard something, a soft, continuous buzzing sound. I managed to crawl through the gap in the branches. There, in a line against the wall, were several vending machines. On some, the glass was broken and the contents of candy and foiled packages, drink cans, and damaged toys scattered amid the weeds and dirt. I instantly felt this gust of wind. It tickled the back of my neck and made me feel uneasy. No one was there, yet I didn't feel alone. I followed the buzzing sound to lights glowing ahead. I stepped forward and held my breath in shock. The lights and sound were coming from one of the machines, an omikuji, a fortune machine, the kind you pay 200 yen to receive a premonition. As I stared at that machine, not understanding how the lights could still be working on it after all this time, I realized I'd been here before. A memory became vivid in my mind, one I'd pushed aside for the last 9 years until now. As a kid, I'd ended up in this alley, back when the town was bustling with people and life, yet the alley was the same as it was all these years later. All the machines were rusted, smashed up, spilled out, and broken, all apart from one, the omikuji. It looked the same then as it did now. Inside it had a red shrine with a mechanical person in front of it. Half their face melted off. I found 200 yen in my pocket, and I placed it in the slot. Then I watched as the melted person disappeared into the shrine and returned with a fortune tube on the platter in their hands, jittered forward, and dropped it in the chute with a clunk. As I'd picked it up, pulled the casing off of it, and unscrawled it, I felt a chill on the nape of my neck. Then I read what it said. Death ends at the start. It was not your normal daiku, which means terrible luck. It was something more than that, something unnatural. And then I ran out of there and found my family. Thinking about it now, I started getting the knowing feelings. Not long after that, I sensed a collision. Before it happened, I knew my sister would fall sick before she did. I knew my grandpa had died before we ever had the phone call. I wasn't a kid anymore, but that machine, it was the same. I stared at that melted mechanical person inside of it. I bashed on the glass. I didn't know what else to do. But something wasn't right about that machine. Despite the glowing lights, it was shrouded in darkness. I didn't see it as a kid, but I saw it now. Then I heard this giggle behind me, a girl's giggle. I turned and I saw Hannah standing there, smirking at me. "Found you," she said before she climbed through the gap in the tree branches and then ran off. I shouted for her to stop. I left the machine behind and I chased after her. I didn't know what was going on, but I needed to find her and I needed to get us both out of there. I was calling out to her, begging her to stop messing around and come back, but it was like my shouts were silenced by something completely unseen. She continued to run past the rusty cars and across the weed-ridden, silent streets. And then I felt it again, that feeling gnawing at my insides and growling inside of my head. I knew something bad was going to happen to her. I screamed to her, "Hannah, stop, please. Minota's dead. I can't lose you too." She stopped and looked at me, but it was a look I didn't recognize in her eyes. Then she smiled at me, a twisted smile. Then she pressed her finger to her lips. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath her feet, and she fell. Only she never screamed. Instead, she giggled, an echoing, deranged giggle. I ran over there, but I couldn't see her beneath the dirt. I couldn't get down there. It was too far, a deep hole of nothingness. I fell to my knees and I called her name. I begged for her to come back, and that's when I felt the familiar feeling on the back of my neck, the gust of wind. I turned and I saw the man standing there, partly hidden in the shadows. He shook his head and in a crackled voice said, "It takes what it wants. You can't stop it." I told him about Hannah. I asked him to help me rescue her, but he'd already retreated back into the shadows. I stayed there calling Hannah's name until her name no longer made sense. I knew in my heart she was gone, but I still stayed. The taste of decay settling on my lips and a fog filling my thoughts. I don't know when I left. I wanted to find the alley and the fortune reading machine. I wanted to smash it to pieces, but no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't see the fallen tree anywhere. I couldn't find the alleyway. I walked for what felt like days. I must have kept on walking, but it was like I was in a trance. I guess I must have found Minato's car and decided to wait there, but I don't remember doing this. And it took days for that trance to fade, by which point I was already back home in my bedroom. But that's when the true reality of the situation really hit me. It was my idea to go to that messed up place. Hannah didn't even want to go, but I convinced her. If I hadn't shouted out to Minato, He wouldn't have been standing there when the structure collapsed. He would have been okay. If I hadn't had chased after Hannah, then she wouldn't have fallen through the ground. Something was wrong with her. She heard voices, but I hadn't listened to her. It was like she was possessed or something. It's my fault. This thing living inside of me made me do it. It made me send them to their deaths. I'm dangerous. I can't risk doing this to anyone else. But I also can't live with the guilt reeling away at me, feeding off my distress. That man in the shadows, he understands. I think the same thing may have happened to him. Now, I think he's trapped there, little more than a living ghost. Maybe there are no answers, and it's too late. Death ends at the start. I don't know what that means. All I know is it's my fault. I led them there, and now they're gone. I can't live with that. I can't live with the emptiness of not having them here, and knowing there's this darkness in me, and knowing it's all my fault. 8 days after being found, Kenzo Mori left his home in the middle of the night. He hasn't been heard from since. His family found a crumpled up old fortune slip under his pillow. On it read the words, "Death ends at the start." The police searched the deserted town resort, finding the bodies of Minato Ito and Hannah Ogawa where Kenzo said they would be. Despite their thorough search of the area, the alley with the fallen tree and containing the vending machines was never found, nor did they find any signs of any survivors living there. The mysteries of what truly happened that day in the resort town near Fukushima, Japan, remain rooted within the ghost town itself. Horrors that lurk within the shadows of the past and creep into the present. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.